and welcome back to Dr. Drill's Making Motivation podcast, where it is our mission to honor interesting and authentic people, tell their stories, try to put some smiles on faces and a little fire under the asses of the masses. You know, my friends, we've got St. Paddy's Day coming up, and we've got the luck of the Irish with us today. I got my good friend Daniel O'Hara, old school Philadelphian, Navy veteran, railroader, family man, and Dan is also an Irish tenor. Welcome, Dan. Take it away.
Welcome. Thank you for having me. I'd like to start the day off with my rendition of Danny Boy.
Let's hear it, brother.
Oh, Danny Boy, the pipes are calling from glen to glen and down the mountainside. The summer's gone and all the roses falling. 'Tis you must go and I must bide. But come ye back when summer's in the meadow, or when the valley's hushed and white with snow. 'Tis I'll be here in sunshine or in shadow. Oh, Danny boy, I love you so. And when you come and all the leaves have fallen, and I am dead as dead I will maybe, you'll come and find the spot where I am lying, and kneel and say an Ave there for me. Then I shall hear those soft you tread above me, and all my graves a sweeter one shall be. Then you will bend and tell me that you love me, and I shall sleep in peace until you come to me. Fill them up again quick, lads.
That's awesome, Dan. When's the first time you sung that song?
Probably a day or so ago. We were down at the St. Paddy's parade on Sunday, so
okay,
the Irish music was flowing.
When'd you learn that?
I started singing Irish songs probably back in grade school, because my entire life I was exposed to mostly Irish culture, Irish songs. I mean, you would, we had all Irish just about in both grade schools that I attended. I first started off at Holy Cross in Mount Airy in Philadelphia, and just about everyone in the class, was O'Brien, McGettick, and Sheehan, Quigley, it was like all Irish. And then we moved up to the suburbs in the mid-50s, and the same thing. I went to Queen of Peace, and the same thing. It was nothing but Irish. But all my aunts and uncles, and we'd go to visit with them throughout my childhood. And
check that camera, brother.
At the end of the day, usually at the end of the evening, my aunts and uncles would all start to get up and sing Irish songs. So it was pretty easy to just fall in line, so to speak.
Yeah, I think you have I see that you have a little show and tell, a little Irish show and tell. Show and tell us about that.
Yeah, this is kind of like a favorite piece of ours. It's St. Bridget's Cross. and it's made from the rushes that grow along the banks of the Shannon River. It's another song where the river Shannon flows. But St. Bridget's Cross, she was an important saint. She's probably second only to St. Patrick. But the significance of this for us, for our family anyway, is my mother's parents lived in a small town right along the banks of the Shannon called O'Brien's Bridge. And we actually visited relatives that we still have over there. And it was unbelievable. When you roll into O'Brien's Bridge, you cross over the stone bridge, which is a one-lane bridge, and you immediately take a left. It's the only street runs through the center of town. And the town had, I'd say, 3 pubs, 1 post office, and 1 general store, and then a sprinkling of homes along the route. And it only ran for maybe 3/4 of a mile, but immediately after you make your left, on your left side, the Shannon's flowing along. And the first thing that you see is a grotto to the Blessed Mother. So it was quite an experience. We visited the Clancy farm, since my mother's name was Clancy. And both my grandfathers were blacksmiths. All my grandparents were born in Ireland and came to America in their teenage years.
Wow.
And yeah, it was quite an experience, our visit to Ireland. We finally got back to the old sod, the old bog road.
What year was that?
My son was doing a summer session over from Holy Cross. He was going to a summer session in London. And we hooked up a vacation at the very end of his summer session. And we spent a week in London, which was terrific. I never thought it would be, but it was a terrific experience. And then we took a week in Ireland to visit all the, Dublin. And we went down to Killarney. We stopped at O'Brien's Bridge to see the relatives. So that was 2005, I would say.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, it was a great trip. A lot of memories.
Yeah.
And to see the people that, they looked just like us, it was all the old Clancy's,
Yeah.
They had plates along the kitchen, and they were monogrammed after all my great grandfather's brothers and sisters.
Wow.
So yeah, it was nice to see, nice to experience.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, man. An Irish tenor. You're the first Irish tenor I've had on the podcast, though. That was awesome, dude. You really carry a tune quite well there. I'd like to hear the River Shannon at some point, I think, as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, that's actually a 3-part song. It has 3 little ditties. All it's from Paddy Noonan's Irish Party. So it's a nice blend of a few little songs that are pretty cute,
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So tell me, you're a family man, right? Tell me about your family.
Yeah, we have 1 son. Well, first of all, my wife Rita. We've been married for 48 years. And let me see. There you go. Just showed low power mode, so I had to plug myself back in.
Nice.
But yeah, I married Rita Vitale. She's an Italian from South Philly. So,
nice. That's a very common combination.
You're not kidding. It's
Irish
the appetite and the Irish Blarney. They blend together well. But yeah, we've been married for 48 years. We have 1 son. He lives in Greenwich, Connecticut, which, it's a little bit of a ride, but we we make the trip quite often because we have two beautiful granddaughters, Evelyn Rose O'Hara and Grace Elizabeth O'Hara. And they're as cute as a button. They were just down to the parade with us on Sunday. And little Gracie was wearing a kilt, believe it or not, an Irish plaid quilt. She looked like the bagpipers coming down the road.
Oh, that's cute, man.
Yeah, it was really great. So we had a good day. We had like 20 of the family down there celebrating.
20?
Yeah, actually, my son used to march in the parade with the St. Joe's Prep, where we went to high school. And I used to march years ago when I belonged to the Emerald Society for a number of years, which is basically FOP and Philly firemen and judges and so forth. But I belonged to the Emerald Society for a few years, and we used to march every year in a parade.
Okay. That's outstanding, man. I didn't even know they had the parade this past weekend.
Yeah, they had it the week before, usually because New York, which is the biggest parade, well, Chicago kind of rivals it, but New York is always right on St. Patrick's Day. They march down Fifth Avenue. Cool. I've been up to that one a few times myself. That's usually a lost weekend back in the day. Yeah.
Get a full snoot going.
Yeah, you get a snoot full and
get a snoot
you can't
full.
find your way home.
Yeah. Oh God. Hey, I got this is a pretty cool talking point. When I was in the for a while, I served in the National Guard. There were two Irishmen. I think they were straight from Ireland. It was Kirkpatrick and Connolly, and they were awesome. But they would go after each other. They were like best buds, but they were always, they'd have a couple little phrases that we would make. Well, we would mimic them. They would say, "Shut your face."
Yeah.
Shut your face, Connolly. Or the other one that was, "For fuck's sake, you wee bastard."
Yeah. They sound like the two that took a shortcut home and they're walking along the railroad tracks. And Mike says to Pat, whoever built this staircase, they put too many damn steps in it. And Pat says, well, I don't mind the steps. But he says, why would they put the railing so damn low?
Good improv, man. Good improv.
Yeah.
So tell me about growing up in old city Philadelphia, man.
Yeah, that was a fun time. We lived in the Mount Airy section just as it came to the border of Chestnut Hill. So I learned quickly as you were growing up, depending on the crowd you were with, if someone said, where are you from? If it was a rough crowd, you'd say Mount Airy. If it was a refined crowd, you'd say Chestnut Hill.
Oh, yeah.
But we lived a few blocks away from the PIO winery. And as I said before, I attended Holy Cross grade school. Before that, I did a couple of years. I don't know what they called it. They didn't call it preschool back then. I think it was just a place where the mothers could drop us off and get a few minutes peace. Because I remember going to Jenks School along Germantown Avenue. And you'd go into school, and about 20 minutes into it, they would take us into a room where there were all cots. And they just say, all right, children, we're going to all take a nap. And we'd all get in our cot and put a blanket up. They'd shut the light off, and we'd go to sleep for an hour or so. And next thing, your mother'd come around to pick you up.
Yeah.
That was the extent of what they call today day school.
Right.
But then Holy Cross, and you hear everybody joke about your parents always telling you that you walked a mile in the snow and walked over broken glass to get to school. Well, we actually walked from our house to Holy Cross, was probably a couple miles. And I'm in first, second, third, fourth grade.
Wow.
And we walked because we had 5 or 6 kids from the neighborhood. one of them happened to be a cousin of ours, an older fella. He was like in 7th grade. So the mothers trusted him to watch us. But we'd walk all along Germantown Avenue all the way down to the Sedgwick Movies and head up to Holy Cross, which had the St. Joe's nuns, which they were always kind of mysterious to me, you know, with their habits and so forth on.
Like
but they
what?
were rough, you know.
The
All
nuns?
the nuns growing up were rough on you, but looking back on it, it was probably the best thing that happened. They instilled discipline for sure, because you dare make a move when they walked into the room. Or you get a ring, or you get a yardstick across your knuckles.
A ring?
Yeah, they used to wear the rings, and they'd come down and kind of tap you in the skull with it, you know.
Oh, no.
Yeah, if you were out of line, but you only get tapped once or twice before you learn not to get out of line.
Don't do that again, yeah.
Yeah, they instilled discipline. I don't know how that would go over nowadays, but that was the way it was, you know, growing up in an archdiocese school.
Yeah.
But yeah, and again, all my aunts and uncles lived in Philly, and it was kind of great. You'd go to visit them, and every neighborhood would have a ton of kids. So the minute you pile out of the car, my parents would go in the house, and my cousins would come out, and it would kind of like whistle for the rest of the neighborhood to come out, and we'd start playing stick ball and wire ball, and you know, everywhere you go, you'd always have plenty of kids to play with.
Yeah.
And then we lived nearby Water Tower Playground, which always had something to do for the kids and a lot of sports to get involved in. And I remember one fella, he was a pitcher for the intermediate team, the older fellas. They were in high school. And he lived right across the street from my grandmother on my father's side. And I would love to watch him pitch, because he was one of the few kids, older kids, he would pitch on the mound while smoking a cigarette. I mean, that was unheard of. But I'm thinking, wow, this guy is unbelievable.
How
He
old
doesn't care about anything, you know. But he was a terrific pitcher, so I guess the coach never bothered him about smoking, because everybody back then, you know, in the 50s, everybody smoked.
Right.
That was like a normal habit. But yeah, it was nice, and you kept a lot of the friends. Like when we moved up to the suburbs for years, my mother would have birthday parties and everything, and invite all the kids from our neighborhood to keep coming to the birthday parties. And they came up to our house probably 4 or 5 years after we moved. And then they slowly dropped off, because as they got older, they got involved in neighborhood events and so forth. But yeah, it was kind of nice. And a lot of things you remember, you know, bad storms back then. They talk about the weather and this climate change nowadays, but, you know, I remember snowstorms where you couldn't even walk down the front steps.
Oh, wow.
You'd come up over your head. And hurricanes, I mean, we had that one hurricane, 1954, was blowing trees down. I forget the name of Ethel or Agnes or one of them.
Mm-hmm.
It was a bad hurricane that blew through the area. So, you know, you had all this crazy weather even back then.
Oh, yeah.
But I had one quick story I had to tell you. We had, you know, early 50s, late 40s, they were introducing TV. So we had a little 12-inch Teletone in our living room, black and white, naturally. And for some reason, I took a trip with my mom down to Philadelphia. She went down to some department store to pick up something, and I went with her, and it started snowing. And by the time we got home, it was around the dinner hour, and it was, you know, quite a bit of snow on the ground. So we get off the train, and we were only about 2 blocks from the train station. So we're walking down Devon Street, and my mom slipped and fell. And at the time, I didn't know, but she had broken her leg. So I'm trying to help her get up. I'm like, I don't know, 8 years old, something like that, 7. And trying to help her up. She couldn't get up. She says, quick, run. We were only like a block away from the house. Run down and get your father. So I run down to our house, go in the front door, and there's my older brother watching one of our shows, you know, like the Mickey Mouse Club or Buffalo Bob or one of those characters.
Yeah.
So I just quick throw my coat over in the corner and sit down and start watching TV with my brother. So it was about 20 minutes. My father comes in the living room, says, "Oh, Dan, you're home. Where's your mother?" And then I said, "Oh, geez, I forgot to tell you. She's right up the street on the sidewalk in the snow."
Oh, shit.
Oh, boy, did I hear about that one.
How'd that go over? Yeah.
Yeah, it worked out. I mean, you know, my father had to take a sled up to get her down, you know, and naturally we got her in the car and he had to take her to the hospital. But, you know, TV, that's the influence, you know, and it got worse as it, you know, more and more.
Your attention, yeah.
It was influencing the young, you know.
Big time.
Like a lot of the people that you thought were your heroes, they were on TV. They weren't real people, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Same as now, man.
Oh yeah, same as now. It's even worse now with these video games and everything.
Yeah, the competition for our attention. Yeah,
you blend it into reality.
Fierce competition for our attention. Yeah, it's
right.
Something else. But that's a good story, and that's a good example of how alluring. It's almost like hypnotizing, you know, especially when.
Oh yeah. As I walked in and saw the screen, I go, "Oh boy, it's a terrific show. I got to sit down here."
Yeah, is this one on? I can't believe the Lone Ranger's doing. Oh my God, is he going to make?
Yeah.
Mom's in the snow with a broken leg.
Yeah.
That's cool. Any you mentioned the guy with this pitcher smoking a cigarette. Any other characters from back in the block? Bully characters or memorable individuals?
No, everybody was pretty good. I tell you what we did get introduced to at Holy Cross, again with the Irish influence and the Irish heritage. It was almost expected of you to enroll in the Irish dancing. Holy Cross had a St. Patrick's Day show every year, and all the kids would get up and perform. But, you know, before you got up to perform, you'd have to go to Irish dancing lessons once a week. And you'd learn how to step dance. So, you know, my brother and I, we went along kicking and screaming. But once you got there, you kind of enjoyed it, again, because you had Irish music playing in the background all the time.
Yeah.
Which I kind of loved. So you quickly learn, you know, the Maggie Pickens and the Haymaker's Jig. And then your big day or big night was the annual St. Patrick's show at Holy Cross Auditorium, where it was packed. You know, all the parents and relatives, they'd all pile in to see their children up on stage dancing to Irish music. So we did that for a number of years. I kind of dropped off when we moved up to the suburbs, but you always remembered, like, our instructor was an old timer. And trying to think, he was, his last name was McNamara, but when you watched him Irish dance, I mean, his feet were flying. And, you know, you'd always kind of say, boy, I wish someday I can dance like he does.
Yeah.
But, you know, he was invited to dancing shows all across the country. Really? And that's back in the 50s. So he preceded the the river dance,
Yeah.
He would really, and he'd have the cleats on his shoes, so you could really hear him flying, tapping. So yeah, a lot of good memories there.
That's cool. So at what point did you decide you're going to join the Navy, Dan?
Well, it's funny. I had probably about 8 or 9 buddies that we went to grade school, high school, hung out together, and we had all kind of made a pact that we were all going to join the Marine Corps, and that was during the Vietnam era. And so I went home one day to tell my mother. I said, Mom, I'm going to join the Marines with the rest of the guys. And then she politely told me, I'll break both your legs if you join the Marines. So that one line kind of motivated me to join the Navy.
She shot that one down, right?
Oh, big time. Big time.
See, remember
You're
when
not going over in those jungles. You watch the news every night, but the whole 9 yards. So
sound wisdom.
Yeah. Looking back on it, it was. So we went up to the recruiting office, and they offered this accelerated program. It was called the Summer Accelerated Training Program for the Navy, where you did 12-week boot camp at Lakehurst, New Jersey. The recruiting office was up in Willow Grove. That's where they signed me up. And then coming out of boot camp, you'd have a choice of an A school. And any A school you wanted, you were able to select it. And coming out of A school, you would report to active duty as an E4, third-class petty officer.
Not too shabby.
Which, when going in, you didn't understand a lot of this, what it actually meant, what were the benefits.
Right.
But once you got immersed in the program, you realize, wow, this is a bonus, especially when you went on board a ship.
Yeah, it puts you way ahead.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there were no mid-watches or no KP. You actually were like a VIP walking on.
That's awesome. That's a good gig.
So it worked out, and I was able to request brother duty because my brother had enlisted in the Navy, and he was already on board the USS Guam, which was a helicopter carrier based out of Norfolk at the time. So I requested brother duty, and I was granted it. And so I reported, and first day it was actually in a clique. I was introduced to all my brother's buddies, which, became my buddies after my brother was separated from the ship. I did 2 more cruises. I did a cruise with him, then I did 2 cruises on my own.
Cool.
So it was a terrific experience starting off with the boot camp, which I would highly recommend. I say this to a lot of folks. Every child should have to go through some sort of a boot camp type summer camp or whatever, just to instill, like when you're a kid, even up through high school, you go to bed, you throw your clothes over in the corner.
Right.
You get out of bed in the morning after 6 or 7 calls from your mother. You don't even look at the bed. You're not going to make your bed. You're going to go down. And then she would have my cereal bowl on the table, the orange juice poured.
Yeah.
Everything was done for you.
Yeah, big time.
But boot camp, taught you how to survive on your own.
Yes.
So, every child should be exposed to that for sure.
I agree.
At least my opinion, anyway.
No, I agree 100%, man. And you said that you had a pretty intense experience right in Lakehurst. You said there were Marine DIs that were running.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it. And I left with my buddies later on. They all came down to watch me graduate from boot camp. And when I told them I had 5 Marine drill instructors, and they were all Vietnam veterans.
Right.
A couple of them had Purple Hearts. They had all kinds of medals on their chest. I had a gunny sergeant, was the head DI. And boy, they worked us over. They were programmed to work us over because that's what boot camp's all about.
Right.
They're there to kind of push you to do more than you think you can do. But they had the hard-nosed tactics that came along with it. You're used to your mother calling you 6 or 7 times to get out of bed. They'd walk down the barracks, banging trash cans, calling you every name in the book at 4 a.m. And you had like 30 seconds to get it attention by your rack. So, it worked. It took a couple of weeks, but, after you're in there for a few weeks, you wind up, running 3 miles, doing 50 push-ups, making sure every button on your shirt is buttoned.
Yep.
Make sure your tray is completely level as you step at attention along the chow line.
Yeah.
All those little things were all designed to make you self-sufficient. So,
yes.
It was quite an experience. And you talk about inspiration. That gunny sergeant was inspiration for me. I mean, you often thought about him and some of the action that he saw over in Nam and how he survived. It's a funny story. The first day I reported, they'd put you on a bus right at the gate. Your parents, you say goodbye to your parents. You got on board this military bus. And naturally, I'm seated towards the back of the bus. And when we pulled up to the barracks, everybody's piling off. And I'm letting guys go by me, trying to be polite about the whole affair. So as a result, I wind up being the last one off the bus. And there's that gunny sergeant standing at the bottom of the stairs. And boy, did he rip into me. And then he tells me to get down and give me, I don't know, he rattled off like 100 push. It was impossible for me to, I was lucky I could do 30.
Right.
So, but that was my first introduction. And then again, like the nuns, it only had to happen once or twice and you learned. You didn't do it the next time.
Now, yeah, that's a fact.
Yeah, I was never last anymore.
For the smart ones now, you ever see anybody, you run into anybody who took more than a few times to learn the lessons?
Yeah, there were a few, but again, they pushed and some kids, couldn't handle it.
Mm.
And, when they wake everyone up in the morning, you're standing at attention, they go through that whole drill, which I guess legally they had to, but they'd say, all right, Annie, and then they'd call you all kinds of names. Anybody who'd like to go home to their mommy or report to sick bay if you have the sniffles, they go through that whole deal.
Yeah.
And for the life of me, I could not believe that for the first week or so, a couple of guys would always step out,
Who wants to go home?
They'd verbally work them over before they allowed them to get dressed and go to sick bay, but then they'd never come back.
Yeah.
So, once you're through the first week and a half, 2 weeks, you were in it to finish it,
Yeah.
But you got stronger every day and you learned to, to work as a unit. We were training with M1 rifles, believe it or not.
Wow.
That was crazy. But, that was your introduction. And then you moved on to A school, which I was an Airedale which is the air side of the Navy, in boot camp. But then when I selected an A school, I picked a personnelman because
We lost your audio, buddy.
For a year before I went on active duty, or even in boot camp. So I had a lot of administrative skills. So I said, all right, so that was Black Shoe. That was the real Navy. So I wound up being a personnelman, went to personnel school in Olathe, Kansas, which is landlocked. Everybody said, what the hell are you doing in Olathe, Kansas in the Navy? It's supposed to be around water. But yeah, it was an experience. And again, it was a good time. You make a lot of friends. You know, we were in the game room in our barracks. They had pool tables there for us. And I was actually at A school for probably 3 weeks. And I hadn't called home. And I remember that day I'm shooting pool with a couple of my buddies. It was after our classes. And we had this kid from Brooklyn. We had a real Brooklyn, New York accent. And the payphone on the wall was ringing, and he picks the phone up. And then he hollers, "Hey, O'Hara, your mother's on the phone."
Was it?
Here I get on the phone. I had to hold it back from my ear. My mother was really ripping into me. We didn't know if you were dead or alive, and yada, yada, yada. So, you know, I gave her that spiel where, hey, the training's pretty intense out here, Mom.
Right.
But yeah, it was a good time, A school, good experience. You know, and oddly enough, when I reported to Kansas, one of my high school buddies, who also joined the Navy, and he had been stationed on the island of Guam as a weather person. Here he was assigned to the naval base at Olathe, Kansas.
Oh, cool.
So again, I report to a base, and I had a friend already on board who all his buddies had cars. So I fell into it again.
That's awesome. You got some good buds.
Yeah.
What was Kansas like? Anything to do over there?
Yeah, actually, we would go into Kansas City, Kansas, which was dry, and then Kansas City, Missouri. I think I have that straight. I'm not sure. One was dry. I guess they're both serve alcohol now, but back in the 60s, one was dry and one was, you know, alcoholic beverages. They had bars and so forth. So we would always go to the other than dry Kansas City.
Yeah.
They were right across the bridge from each other.
I'm sure those Irishmen. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So we always had a good time there. Plus they had a school for airline stewardesses there. So that always made it interesting.
That worked out. Yeah.
But you know, it's like you hear in the songs and everything, the levees. You know, drove my Chevy to the levee.
Yeah.
That's actually what they do out there. We wound up driving out to the levees, you know, with a case of beer. You get out and shoot the breeze, and everybody's hang out there. They have music playing. You know, you'd have the car radio on. What's
a levee? Is that like a dam?
Yeah, it's like a bank, a man-made bank that kind of, if the river would overflow, you know, have a little leeway there, you know, before it started to flood the place out.
Yeah. So everybody hang out at the levee because
it
was a little bit out
of
the way.
The guys from the base, from the Navy base, and then you usually have some locals that knew people, and they would be there. So it would just be like a impromptu party every night.
That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a good time. Again, good experience. And then to Guam, that was a whole other story reporting there. Like I said, I knew my brother and his buddies right away. We were down in the same compartment, and a lot of the memories there, you know, like when you first got on board the ship, it's so tight going through those, gangways and so forth. You think to yourself the first day or two you're on board, how the heck am I going to live in this confined space, you know?
Seriously, yeah.
But after a week or two on board, it's like a palace. You know, you get used to your surroundings. So, you had your barracks, you had the crap games afterwards when you were out at sea. You got close with a lot of fellows. I had one fellow was on board. He was actually in the top rack that I was assigned to.
Right.
I'm in the lower rack. And the first night we set sail for our cruise. And this kid was from Atlantic City, by the way.
Yeah.
And I'd figure, oh boy, I got a guy that's close by, you know, a lot of things we can relate to. He starts throwing up in the middle of the night. First night.
And he's on the top.
Actually, his first episode, he actually hit my shoes. So, the next morning, I said, hey, you hit the bottom rack.
Good idea.
And he was seasick and then, I ribbed him about Atlantic City. Come on. How the heck can you be seasick?
Serious.
But 40 days he was sick. He was going to sick bay every morning, and they would give him pills. And then, like one day, like a light switch, he stopped being sick. He lost like 20 pounds.
I bet. Yeah, man.
It was unbelievable. When you were tied up at dock, he was fine. The minute the lines would be thrown overboard or disconnected, he would get sick. It was really crazy. But, the compartment was fun. And we saw a lot of, we used to, on our cruise, our mission was we'd leave Norfolk and head right to Onslow Beach, Camp Lejeune.
Yeah.
And we would bring on board helicopter squadrons and 3,000 Marines. And then we'd head down to Vieques Island. And for a couple of weeks, we would run drills on getting the helicopters off and into their destination with the Marines loaded on board as fast as possible. You time every drill. And speed was the big deal, getting everybody on board and getting them off as quickly as possible. And you'd have your hangar deck elevators. As soon as a few helicopters would take off, the next set would come up the elevators and roll them into place.
Yeah.
So, and I was involved in a lot of that because I was actually the captain's phone talker on the bridge. So, and that was a real neat experience because you had especially at general quarters, you would probably have maybe 25, 30 people on the line with you.
Wow.
So, and people on the bridge, especially the captain, he'd be barking out this and that, and then you'd have to relay everything. So, but you got, it was a perfect view of the whole flight deck and the activity. I mean, it was amazing to see something like that and how quickly things moved.
Yeah.
Everybody knew their job and they just did it. And then same thing when they come back on board, the same thing, getting them off the helicopter and then getting the helicopter onto the elevators down, and the next ones would come in and you go through the reverse drill. So we did that for a couple of weeks, and then unfortunately for the Marines, they would stay on the island in all the cow manure and the jungles, and learning jungle warfare.
Right.
Well, we would go off to all these beautiful islands down the Caribbean, spreading goodwill and cheer. But we had a lot of good liberty spots. Yeah, so we had a lot of fun. I think I told you this one story. We were in Cologne, Panama,
Hmm.
Panama City, and I would always go over with the same group of guys. There was guys from Jersey, North Jersey, and guys from New York. And you'd go get on Liberty and you go get a snootful. And one time in Panama, we're coming back to the ship, and I see this native down there, his vendor. He's selling these parrots. So naturally, I stop and I'm going to buy one. I forget what the heck I paid. It was only like $5 or something. But these parrots are the ones that very colorful, and they grow to a good size, and they live for like 50 years. So I take a paper bag and I put the parrot in the bag, and we get on the ship, and the officer at the deck, we, once you walk on the gangplank, you salute, permission to come aboard. And he kind of looks us over because you're coming back from Liberty, but I had the paper bag in my hand. He never even asked to see what was in it or anything else.
Nice.
And down to the compartment we go, and I take the parrot, which I quickly named Lifer. I take him and I put him up on my towel rack, which is right above my head on the rack. And I go to sleep immediately, try to sleep the snootful off. And I wake up the next morning, I'm looking up and I see this parrot looking down at me. His head's twisting this way and that way. I'm thinking, where the hell am I? And what is this? And then it slowly came back to me, he had his droppings all along the side of my mattress.
Oh, shit.
But he became the head of the compartment. And he was on board with us for probably a couple months.
Wow.
The 3-month cruise. And I had the head of the carpenter shop build me like a giant estate, a wooden bird cage. I mean, it had floors on it. It was amazing. The parrot loved it. He had a swing he built on it.
Oh.
And everybody in the compartment would stop and, play with Lifer, take him out of the cage, have him walk along the tile floor with his feet slipping. So he became part of the family, and I was trying to train him to talk because I just envisioned me when I got off the ship. I would go back to the Jersey Shore to Maloney's, which was a favorite watering hole of ours down at Margate.
Yeah.
I could just see myself walking into Maloney's with the parrot on my shoulder saying, I'll have 7 for $1. I was trying to teach Lifer, say 7 for $1. They get 7 drafts for $1 back then. But it wasn't meant to be because here we're steaming home to Norfolk, and we're a couple of weeks out. And we hear this announcement over the loudspeaker as the executive officer come on. And he says, it's come to my attention that a few sailors on board here have parrots that they bought along the way. And then he launched into this whole parrot fever and being quarantined off the coast. So he said, I would recommend that those that have parrots get rid of them immediately.
Ah, shit.
So it was a sad day in the compartment. I must have had 30 sailors come over to say bid farewell to Lifer. But I took them up on a flight deck and said, hey, this is it, buddy. Sink or swim. I didn't know if he could fly. I had a sneaking suspicion he couldn't. But I gave him a shot. I took him up to the flight deck, threw him up in the air, probably 10 or 12 feet, but he went right down.
Oh, man.
No flight in him.
Poor
so
Lifer.
That was the end of Lifer. Sad party.
He had a pretty good run for a while.
He did.
Oh, man. That would have been great for you to take them back to Melodies, though.
Oh, wouldn't that have been something? Just to see the expression on the bartender's face.
Yeah, that's a story to tell.
Yeah, for sure.
How about that story you told me about the transport ship?
Oh, the Mike boat, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the islands, our ship was too big to pull into port. So we would anchor out and we'd take these old Mike boats that you see like on your movies of D-Day,
Mm-hmm.
we wouldn't, flop down the end of the Mike boat. You'd get a ladder and you'd get out it when you pulled into the dock. But they would send us over on Liberty, and it was usually St. Thomas or one of the really nice islands that we would hit. We usually hit a couple nice islands once we went back to Vieques and picked up the Marines. So the Marines would at least get a little bit of liberty before they were sent over to Nam. So again, you're over there and you're drinking all night, and Liberty ends and you pile into the Mike boats to go back to the ship. And it's all Marines and sailors just standing down in the well of the Mike boat. And you've got like 40 personnel standing down there and all feeling no pain. So I'm with my buddies, and over the shoulder of one of my buddies, I see this little Marine. He'd probably make 5'5", something like that. But what zeroed in my attention was he was actually eating a sandwich. I'm thinking, oh, you know how the rum hungers hit you.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just politely reached over my buddy's shoulder and snatched the sandwich out of the Marine's hands and started eating it. Well, it's like the old Irish expression, call the undertaker, I'm going to start something. So before you know it, the whole Mike boat's, wailing,
Jeez.
Everybody's fighting everybody. And we get out to the ship, and the master at arms, he's down there trying to sort people out and getting them up the ladder. I get up the ladder with a couple of my buddies. Our uniforms, our tropical whites, were a mess. And with the officer of the deck, he sees me. I'm in charge of the personnel office, believe it or not. He starts with, you're a disgrace to the United States Navy and blah, blah, blah. And all we wanted to do at the time was get down to the Iraq.
Right.
But, I think I was restricted to next Liberty port. I wasn't allowed to go over on Liberty. So, but, that's what happens when you have a few too many.
Yeah.
But they're memories,
Yeah, man. Great memories. Great story.
Yeah, for sure. And it's funny how your buddies are right there when you need them.
Yeah.
When something started, they were ready. They got your back,
Yeah, they're like, O'Hara stole that sandwich. Started eating it right in front of the guy. Oh, all hell breaks loose. That's a great story.
Guantanamo Bay was the same thing. I don't know why they mixed everybody.
Yeah.
We were on a shakedown cruise in Guantanamo. They'd load you into these cattle cars at the piers. They'd stop at every pier and pick up Marines and sailors and take them to a big, giant beer hall.
Oh.
And you'd be drinking pitchers of beer all night. And then they'd put you back in that same doggone cattle car to drive back to the pier. So they kind of knew what was going to happen. The doors would open at your pier and guys would be fighting and rolling out the doors.
Yeah, not a good idea.
No, not at all.
So then you move on. You get out of the Navy.
Yeah.
And you hit the railroad. You worked for the railroad for 48 years?
Yeah, actually, I hired on the railroad right out of high school because I had been accepted to LaSalle College. But my dad told me, and believe it or not, tuition back then for LaSalle was $450 a year.
Wow.
But he said to me, listen, you got an obligation to Uncle Sam, so rather than you going into college and just partying it up, go into service and then use that GI Bill to pay for your college. So, I listened to him. So that's when I started. But I had been on the railroad for a year. And before I was drafted. And then that's when I went to recruit. Like I was originally looking forward to the Marines, but
right.
With my mother's ultimatum, I, reluctantly got in the Navy. But yeah, I had a year on the railroad before I reported for duty.
Oh.
And back then, the railroad was considered government duty. So the time in the service counted as seniority on the railroad, which on the railroad seniority is a big deal.
Yeah.
You can hold a better job with more seniority. So when I got out of the Navy, I went back to the railroad and, I was able to pick a job. It was decent pay and decent hours. And that was the Reading Railroad that I was a part of. I had hired on the Reading. And back in the early 70s, a lot of the Northeast railroads were in decline, losing money, tracks were decaying.
Mm.
So that's when the government decided to form the Consolidated Rail Corporation. And I had gone into a management position in 1973 with the Reading. So in 75, they had the Federal Railroad Administration come into Philadelphia to help consolidate the Philadelphia terminal, which, was PRR and Reading. And it was, Philadelphia is a very complex terminal.
Yeah.
So they asked me to serve on this study group, which I did, to kind of form a consolidated terminal in Philadelphia that would actually work, and it would allow the Conrail to start abandoning tracks that you really didn't need, and to spend money on tracks that were vital,
right,
and to bring them up to speed, to bring them up to standard. Because when we first became Conrail in April of 76, I was a train master at the time, transportation manager in Philly, and I had a pretty good share of the Philadelphia terminal. But you would spend your day going on 5 to 6 derailments. Some were minor, some were a little more severe, but and you only had a couple block trucks, the fellows that you would call from the car department to come out and help you re-rail. And they could only go to one spot at a time. You had the wreck truck from Reading and the wreck truck from the Pennsy. But you had so many derailments that you would quickly learn how to re-rail cars on your own, just to keep the operation moving. Because, that was your whole mission there, was to serve the customers. And a lot of times you would derail about 50 yards from the actual customer siding. And you'd actually have customers coming out to talk to you to say, hey, I need this product.
right.
Got to get this in along my siding so I can unload it. So you learn quickly to re-rail on your own. And you got better at it the more you did it. But then you watch Conrail grow. And I was fortunate enough to be in an interesting spot in the rail industry. Because, when I hired, you had hot plates, an old-fashioned coffee pot where you perked your coffee.
Yeah.
You'd have, if you brought a snack in or food or a sandwich, you want to heat it up, you'd have it wrapped in tin foil and put it on the hot plate. You'd have a can of carnation cream to put in your coffee, or powdered stuff. But then you moved on. You had, I was working a teletype machine when I hired. You had dial phones. and then you watch through the years about, microwaves and, Mr. Coffee pots and,
All the technology, yeah.
yeah, cell phones. I mean, we started with IBM key punch machines, which was a few years before you actually had computers. So, yeah, it was an interesting time. Everything was written down or typed with carbon paper.
Right.
Most young kids, I guess today, they know hard to describe carbon paper. They wouldn't even know what the heck it is. But, you watched how the railroad progressed and how life progressed. And, I'd have to say, Stanley Crane was our first president, and he did the hard stuff. He had to abandon a lot of lines, so he could focus on getting the railroad back up and running and getting it in decent shape, because we were being subsidized by the federal government. So you didn't mess around too long, because otherwise you'd be replaced.
Serious, yeah.
So yeah, it was fun to watch that, and I was with Conrail its entire history. And then we had the Norfolk Southern, and CSX came in and split us up. And that's a long story how that all occurred. But anyway, Norfolk Southern and CSX split Conrail. I was offered a position with the Norfolk Southern. That was back in '98. And I accepted it because I told them I didn't want to be relocated. I didn't want to wind up being somewhere down in Tupelo or wherever, down south.
Right.
So, yeah, I wound up staying with the NS. And then we had an opportunity to take an early buyout after probably 3 or 4 years, I guess, with the NS. And because the territory I had with the NS, I was a superintendent, but it was a large territory to cover. Went up into North Jersey, down into Philadelphia, down in southern Jersey, all the way up to Birdsboro.
Okay.
A lot of track to cover, a lot of terminals to stay on top of. So, I took the early buyout, and I was only retired for maybe, I'd say, month and a half. But I knew I was getting restless, because I would actually find myself going in the grocery store, and I could actually find the Tabasco sauce without asking anyone where it was. And they only carried like 4 or 5 bottles of that, and they had it hidden behind the salt or some doggone place. But when I could actually walk in the store and go right to the Tabasco sauce for my Bloody Marys, I knew I was in trouble. I had been retired too long. So
domestic, you had been turned domestic, yeah.
I have, yeah. So here, a buddy of mine that took the early buyout at the same time, he had already gone to work for an outfit called Bombardier Transportation Company. They had a contract with New Jersey Transit to design, build, operate, and maintain a D-bomb job with New Jersey Transit for the River Line over in Jersey.
Yeah.
Run along the Delaware there. So he asked me if I'd consider coming to work. So he asked me to come over one day and just look around. They were still meeting in an office. They didn't have their building finished. So I went over, and that day they offered me a position. I said, yeah, why not get back into the groove? And I was like the 4th person on board. We were going to do the hiring and write the books, safety books, operational books, and start hiring people. And then we would go out and test the line as they were building it ahead of us. We had to go out and test the crossings and et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually called up 4 fellas, 2 engineers and 2 conductors that worked with me for years. I had called them to ask them if they'd like to come out of retirement to run a locomotive and do the testing with me. So they were happy to do it too, because they were probably in the same boat. going right to the Tabasco sauce aisle. So, yeah, that was a great time because I thought I'd only be there a year. I wound up spending 10 years there. But, it was, what a contrast. You worked for 30 some years, almost 40 years, with old dilapidated freight railroads, buildings and yards and tracks, and you go to a brand new operation. So it was a nice experience. And you were hiring kids right off the street. They were bus drivers. They worked in Burger King. All these different places. You'd bring them in and teach them how to run a local. It was a light rail vehicle.
Yeah.
The train. You teach them how to run the train up and down at 65 mile an hour from Camden to Trenton. So it was a rewarding experience the day we opened back in 2004. We had big press, and all the dignitaries from Trenton and Camden came on board. And it was nice to see all the kids that you trained and taught how to run a railroad actually perform for the first time.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was a nice experience. And then I did a year with Parson Brinkerhoff, consulting for Amtrak. And then I finally called it quits after 48 years.
Wow, man.
Back to the Tabasco aisle.
Yeah. Now, this is a novice question, but I'm just thinking my limited knowledge of trains. Hobo stories, train wrecks, any sort of obstructions, anything like that?
Yeah, a lot of bad memories there. In my position, I was always out in the field. And you would go on some accidents that you really had a rough time getting through it.
Yeah.
Especially kids, they always hear the advertisement, don't play on the railroad, but it's true. I mean, I stood beside a young kid in Nicetown, had his foot cut off because he and his buddies were trying to hop the train to ride it for a little ways.
Mm-hmm.
He went down and wheel ran right over his leg. I mean, he's on the bank talking to me like a normal conversation. And, I'm looking at him with no foot, and it felt like an eternity before the ambulance got there.
Sure.
But he was in shock, guys, I had a towerman call me one day, and he was, as a towerman, you would watch a passing train for any kind of difficulty with the train. If you spotted something, you'd have to stop it and have him check it out. But here he saw a guy, spread eagled on board a boxcar. Apparently a hobo come up from Baltimore, and they must have gone through an overhead bridge that didn't allow clearance. And when I climbed up on board the ladder to the roof, this fellow was gone. So he never got to where he was heading.
Oh, man.
And I had other comical stories. I had 2 car inspectors were working on a boxcar. And I got a call right away that one fella got hit in the head with a sledgehammer while they were working on the car. I go up there and I'm talking to him, and he just collapsed in my arms. I throw him in my car, take him to the hospital. By the time I got back to the office, the guys in the office, the yard there, were already doing jokes about that whole deal. They said, "Oh yeah, the one carman where they were fixing a stirrup, and the other fellow he said, the other fellow was swinging a sledgehammer, and apparently he said to his partner, 'You nod your head, and I'll hit it.'" So, they made a joke where you nod your head and I'll hit your head instead of the stirrup. So, the fella had a severe concussion. because you get hit in the forehead with a sledgehammer. You're lucky you're alive.
My God.
Another guy was cutting the brake rigging off of a boxcar at a bad derailment we had over at 44th Street. And I hear this guy screaming and hollering. I'm walking around trying to keep things moving to get things back in order. And I hear this guy screaming. So I lean down and flashing my light. We're out there at night. I'm saying, "What's wrong, George? What's wrong?" And he just kept screaming. Then I realized, I looked at the wheel. When he cut the brake rigging off, the car moved a couple inches. And he had his hand on the rail. And the wheel of the boxcar was on his fingers.
Oh.
So I had to go run and get the wreck master, and everybody quickly moved the car. He lost all the tips of his fingers.
Oh, my goodness.
But, things like that, you just, every day was a different experience, which made it pretty interesting. You had major wrecks, 20, 30 cars piled up. You'd call everybody and their dog out to re-rail. You'd have Hulcher, you'd have major re-railing groups that you contracted that would come out and upright everything and get them out of there. Then your track department had to hustle in and put the railroad back together.
Right.
But it was an interesting. I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was very interesting. Something new every day. That's what I like, the variety. You weren't sitting at a desk every day.
Yeah, it sounds fascinating, man. I have a bunch of buddies who I grew up with, and many of them work Amtrak.
Yeah,
in various capacities, and I'd like to see them compare notes with you as to how things are done now and versus then, to hear about some of the old stories and compare them. So, awesome, brother. Well, let's close it out. This is the Making Motivation podcast. So, Dan, if you could think of something like a distillation of all the things we just talked about. We covered your growing up in Philly, sang a little Irish tune for us. You're reminiscing about your time in the Navy and on the railroad, and told us a little bit about yourself and your family. What motivates you about life, or what kind of a quote or some kind of pearls that the listener can take away, recommendations to live a good life?
Yeah, I would have to say, and I tell my son this quite often, always be willing to learn. I mean, a lot of times you hear my son and his buddies say, we went to this meeting, it was just this, and it was really a waste of time. I would always tell them, it's never a waste of time, no matter what you're doing. You're never wasting your time. You're learning something that you're going to use. As trivial as it may seem, you may not even realize it.
Right.
But later on in life, you'll find that, I learned that. I went to Penn State. I did it the hard way. I worked on the railroad full time. I went to Penn State. I would go to night school, then day school, depending on the shift that I had on the railroad. But you'd learn something from a professor that didn't mean a whole lot at the time. But later on in life, you'd find out you could actually use what they were talking about.
Right.
So, every minute you're always experiencing something and you're learning something that's going to pay dividends in the future.
Sound wisdom, brother. All right. I love you. And I look forward to seeing you later on this week. I appreciate the time you spent with me, Dan. Yeah,
no problem. I appreciate you having me on.
You're a good man. I'll send you the transcript, and you can see yourself on TV here. So, all right, brother. You did great, man. You're a natural storyteller. So, outstanding. Have a great day, man.
Yeah, you too, Doc. Take care. Right on.